Catherine, you and I have talked to female political leaders, to top journalists and lawyers, to activists and athletes. But I'm pretty sure that today marks the first time we've talked to a leading punk rock artist.
Oh, yes, I think you are correct. And wow, how lucky are we to be chatting with Bif Naked today, Jen? I was honestly in university when the song Spaceman came out, and I loved that song. And that album, I Bificus of Bif Naked's, it went on to become double platinum in Canada, and it cemented her reputation as a Canadian rock icon. And that's just one album. She's had a multi-decade Juno Award-winning, frankly, global career.
Yep, Bif Naked has had a really unusual and inspiring life, and she's here today to talk to us all about it. Bif Naked, welcome to the Honest Talk.
It's a real pleasure to be here and to talk with you guys today.
So, you have a pretty wild birth story. Born in India in secret to teenage parents whose families rejected you. You were housed in a mental hospital until you were adopted by missionaries. That is not an easy storybook infancy. How did these early days shape who you are today?
You know, I have an amazing story, and it actually has a lot to do with Ottawa, believe it or
Yay,
not.
Ottawa.
Yeah, and it's funny because, now as an adult, I have a fantastic, obviously, I've had a great upbringing. My parents are fabulous individuals. They were both, I don't know how to even, they're bleeding heart socialists. Even though they're Americans, they're civil rights activists. My dad was a dentist, but he had his master's in public health. So he was, I could
Yeah.
drone on and on about my parents, but they wound up moving to Canada when my sisters and I were very small. And I was the only Canadian in my family. So, and this is where I always bring in Ottawa because I have lots to say about the government. I have, and it's not that I'm such a critic, but I have a Canadian birth abroad card.
Yeah.
And I've been married 3 times. And I'm such an optimist that I always change my name. So I'm on a first name basis with a lot of people at the passport offices and, and CSIS because I have 4 last names. And it's just, I'm an optimist. It's a nightmare for me to get a passport anyways. So I have a Canadian birth abroad card, which they don't do anymore as a result. And the first name on my card is Baby because, of course, I had no name. And my adoptive parents are fantastic. I was the only Canadian in my family because they're American. And I now know my birth mom. And so I have a great relationship with my birth mom who lives in Canada now. And she's only 15 years older than me.
Wow.
I also have great insight into just, in general, what is environmental in my personality and what is genetic. And these things are glaringly obvious. And we get it's a riot. We have a ball kind of, figuring this stuff out. And it's it's very specific and it's a lot of mannerisms and it's a lot of enunciation things. And it's wild. Wow. But, I've been really, really lucky and I love being a Canadian. I've been a Canadian my whole life and I love Ottawa. It's my favorite city in Canada. I always talk about it in those terms. But being an adoptee is something that is a very powerful part of my existence. And it really did shape who I am. And I've always known I was adopted, even though I'm fiercely pro-choice. It doesn't make me, crazy in any weird way. I think it did definitely shape who I am as an adult.
So, it's interesting that you've really talked about the adoption element, but you also refer to your parents very much as mom and dad.
Yes.
I mean, they are your parents, and they were really open about the fact that you were adopted. And sometimes when you talk to kids who are adopted, there's been a bit of trauma because they didn't know, it was never talked about, and then they found out. Was it a positive thing in your household when people talked about the fact that you were adopted, or did you talk about it openly? It didn't make you feel othered or or anything like that? Because you had an adopted sister and I think a sister who was born to both your parents.
Yes,
Is that
both.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
also in that regard, my older sister was adopted a year before me, and she's an Indian baby. You know, there was a brown kid, a white kid, who's me, and my younger sister, who's my parents' natural child, also Caucasian. You know, so you know we have this kind of weird and wonderful, multicolored family growing up, and my parents really did encourage us, even though my parents were Christian, they really encouraged us to really explore our Indian birthright, is how my parents put it. And even though my sister was the brown kid and I was basically the white kid with no real general knowledge, I knew my birth mom was Caucasian, but she was also adopted. So there was no, real understanding of where I came from. You know, was I Portuguese? Was I Russian? You know, I had these wild fantasies. You know, what could I be? You know, what great thing could I be?
Yeah.
So they,
And you were Canadian.
yeah, which I was proud of. But basically, my father accused me of being a cherry picker, because I was, I was a real, I had a love of theology, and wanted to go into divinity studies and all of this stuff that he teased me mercilessly about. Of course, I dropped out of university and joined a punk rock band instead, which is very close to divinity. But I think that we were lucky to be raised in a home that allowed us to ask all those questions. Do I can't say if it's because my parents were academics that we were, encouraged in all of these ways. We didn't grow up with the internet, so
Yeah.
if we had grown up with the internet, maybe we would have found all of these things on our own. But my parents just encouraged us to read and to seek and explore on our own. So that was really nice, and we were very lucky.
How do you avoid like the victim mentality based on everything that's happened in your life? You've had a lot of ups and downs, but you don't, from what I know, you don't have it, which I really love. Like you're talking about, you're using the word fortunate, you're focused on the positive, and somebody that has had your story could go into a little victim hole and feel sorry for themselves. How do you mentally reframe, what's happened to you, and be so positive and
I'm
such a
still
force?
learning and unlearning as I go along, and I've discovered in my 50s, and I got married at 18. I married my drummer, of course, proximity.
Yeah.
You marry someone at work. And then I didn't get married again until I was 36 years old. Of course, I was diagnosed with breast cancer 2 weeks after I was married.
Oh boy.
And that was, I could drone on about that entire experience for a while. We were only married for 2 years. That's
Yeah.
all I'm going to have to say about how that went. And then I got married again in my 40s, and then that unraveled. And so now here I am as a woman in her 50s who's been very lucky to be a working artist all of these years. And now I look ahead into, this chapter in my life, and like a lot of women of my generation, Gen X, um, I have no regrets really in my life. Certainly I wish I would have had kids, because all of my other girlfriends had kids, and now all their kids are in university or have moved on. And now all my girlfriends are partying and up, and I'm just like, you all have pensions, and I'm a working artist. It doesn't work that way. But I've discovered that I'm still learning, and I'm still
Yeah.
learning about how my story is. And I think we tell ourselves stories, and we have a story that goes along with our life, and we retell our story. And I'm discovering, what is my story? Well, my story is, I'm a working artist in my 50s. I've been married this many times, and this and this and this. And I think how we tell our stories is whether or not we are victims, and whether or not we carry with us this victim story that we have. And we get to rewrite our story. if we feel
I
like,
love that.
and I'm discovering these little stories I may or may not have been telling myself or telling others. And I get to re-examine that as I move forward, and I get to re-examine. I'm trying very hard now, because I'm in a fresh unraveling yet again of a relationship. I didn't anticipate this. Of course, we can't anticipate how things are going to go, and I'm getting to try and reframe it again. And even though we can, look at our life and go, well, I'm an optimist, and well, I want to remain positive and all these things. And I practice yoga, and I'm this and that, and I'm, this and that, and I want to live in gratitude. I think that we go through life and we want to feel like we check our privilege, and we really want to be very aware, and we want to remain that way. Because the world is really a dumpster fire. It's really, it's just really fallen apart in this last year, and it's hard. It's hard to feel sorry for ourselves in any way with everything that's going on in the world. However, that being said, just even us talking briefly about migraines and the things that do happen for women, on a daily basis, I can sit there and go, God, I have such a migraine, I can't even crawl out of bed. But then I have to go, well, at least I'm not, having to go and be a cashier with some terrible boss that's not going to give me a morning off, or at least the clutch in my car is not broken and I got to drive my kid to school. Like, I can still do those little narratives and go, well, knock on wood, I can still do these things. However, how do we still reframe our BS? That, we can still do that silver lining talk, because it's a habit. It's a great habit to still have that optimism talk that we have. But the truth is, there's a lot of things that suck from day to day, that we need to talk ourselves out of. It's like that self-talk. We always talk about that negative self-talk, and people do bemoan toxic positivity. It's a very popular catchphrase, but I really don't think there's anything toxic about positivity. You want to talk about having toxic positivity, go talk to all the parents at Sick Kids Hospital who have to talk themselves into being positive every single morning, every single day, day after day. There's nothing toxic about them trying to talk themselves into optimism every day. So I think that, the story that we can write for ourselves each morning really can make a difference.
So I love the focus on optimism, like Jen was saying. We've had such you have had such an interesting life, and part of the reason we're having this conversation is because it's the 25th anniversary of the release of your huge album, I, Bif Naked. But I want to kind of take us back to the beginning, because at the beginning, as I understand it, you were thinking that you might have a career in ballet. You thought you were going to be a prima ballerina, and you're quoted as saying, instead, I discovered heavy metal music, smoking cigarettes, and chasing boys. That's a quote from you.
Oh, yeah.
And I read that and I was like, wow, her parents must have been thrilled. So why the sudden left turn in life? Because you had a fairly, I don't want to say traditional upbringing, but you had an upbringing that probably didn't naturally lead to punk rock.
Not at all. But, we were living in Dauphin, Manitoba, home of, that was Canada's national Ukrainian capital. Yeah. And I learned to flick a cigarette butt walking home from school in grade 8. Like every other grade 8 girl. No offense to grade 8 girls. And for all the parents who are upset with me for saying it was grade 8, just lie and tell your kids that I was in college. And that was just how it was. And I probably, let's be honest, I was never going to be a prima ballerina. I'm sorry. I liked pierogies and French fries. There was no way I
Yeah.
was talented enough or lithe enough to be a ballerina. And I just didn't have the self discipline, truthfully. But I think that I believe in destiny for sure. I was a performing arts kid. Yes, that's a fact. I never shut up, ever. I was in drama class, but I never took choral. I wasn't a singer. I'm still not a singer. It wasn't hard to sing in a punk rock band. I didn't have to be good. you know, all I had to have was something to say. And, social justice is a catchphrase today, but back in the late 80s, we were upset about, stuff that we saw on the news, and we were upset about the way people were being treated, and we sang songs about it. And that's all it really took to be in a band. And today, that's still all it really takes.
Mm.
You faced a breast cancer diagnosis in your 30s. And I think Catherine and I, we all know so many women fighting cancer right now or who have had breast cancer, and it's a really terrible, awful disease. How did that experience shape you, or what was that experience like for you?
It was amazing. It was the best thing that ever happened to me in so many ways. And for me, I think that lived experience was really important to have in my life. To have a surgical port, to go through chemotherapy, to lose my hair, um, to go through radiation, and to feel the after effects of that for 5, 7, 10 years was important for me to know, because if some uh, charity or women's group is going to hire me to speak about
Mm.
something, I want to be able to really know what I'm talking about, so that when I'm speaking to women who are going through it, I want to be able to honestly speak to them, and for them to feel like I really know what I'm talking about, and not just to be some woman up there in a dress that they can't relate to.
Hmm. Hmm.
And even us talking about migraines, as debilitating as migraines are, I know that a doctor prescribing me a medication that may or may not help my migraines, that is $65 to pay for. I know that there are women out there who are having migraines that are either due to menopause or whatever, or due to their ex-husband and stress. They can't afford $65 for a
Yeah.
medication that doesn't work, because that's groceries for the week.
Yeah.
And so for me, I just think it's important for me to have this lived experience so
Hmm.
that I can speak to it. Because I really think that breast cancer was, I mean, it gave me it gave me an experience to have a fellowship with women I never would have had.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
never would have had that experience of I was never around women. I was in a tour bus with men from
Yeah.
the age of
Mhm.
18 until my diagnosis at 36. I'd never taken even a week off of touring in my
Hmm.
adult life.
Wow.
I called it my cancer vacation because I had never been off tour ever. And it was amazing. Cancer shows you what you're made of. It shows you what you're.
Hmm.
I mean, any health crisis will. But it really gave me an insight into the health industry and the cancer industry and the pharmaceutical industry. But granted, for me, that was 13 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, do I feel I'm lucky to be alive every day? Did I overcome things after that, like heart surgery? Yes. Do I think having to have heart surgery was due to radiation that was targeted at my tumor that was close to my heart? I can't say. Would I do exactly the same treatment again? Yes, I would, because I listened to my doctor. I loved the fact that I was kind of accidentally dragged into volunteering because of my proximity to the patient population. And I became a palliative care volunteer as a result of being a patient. I never would have
Wow.
ever thought of it had I not been a patient. And, before the pandemic, I was you know, getting death doula training through Home Hospice Association here in Toronto. Um, there are so many things that happened because I was a
Hmm.
patient, and I feel so fortunate to have had that experience and to be able to be a volunteer because of it.
You've been through a lot of different experiences in life. Like you have really had a varied career and a varied personal life, and you've had extremes too, right? You've gone from being more of a, I don't know if a wild child is the way to say it. You had a wild youth, and then an incredibly interesting and vibrant and award-winning musical
Yeah.
career, but in an area where you don't traditionally see necessarily a ton of women. And now you're someone who's, you've received honorary degrees. So, what's your advice to other women about staying true to themselves through all the ups and downs of life?
Oh my gosh, the number one thing that we can do as women, the number one thing is just to laugh. Like, I really think that
Mm.
and I know that probably most women know this, as we get older, things, they just have to get funnier. They
Yeah.
just have to get funnier. We have to be able to laugh at ourselves, and with one another. I
Hmm.
really believe that the fellowship of other women, and you don't even have to know other women to be able to share a laugh with them.
Yeah.
A lot of the laughs that I have are with Christine, Patricia, and Wendy at Sobeys. Those
Yeah.
are my cashier girlfriends.
I love
And we
that.
laugh. We laugh. Oh my God, we have a laugh as we're bagging groceries. We really do. Because, I mean, either we're laughing about their cats or my dog or our husbands or, trying to find money for parking. And we just laugh like, can you believe this shit? Like, just like, I mean, and we laugh and it's genuine, and a shared laugh between women is something that is real and will always really make our day.
It's the absolute best. And I think age
Yeah,
also brings that perspective. Like,
yeah,
when I first had kids, everything was so serious, and you get a perspective as they get older, or when you start your career, it's the only thing that
yeah,
matters. And at the end of the day, you just nailed it, Biff. Like, it's
yes.
that shared community and that ability to have a good laugh and look at life in a bit of a lighter way, which is pretty special. I think you're just incredible, and I love your optimism. I love the lessons that you've taken and how you've chosen to kind of channel all the experiences in your life to who you are. And we're just really thankful that you're able to join us today on the Honest Talk.
Oh, me too. I am too. I'm so happy to be on the show, and I can't wait to see you guys the next time I'm in Ottawa.
We would love that.